Take your last breath, you worthless nobody.
Officer Voss leaned over the hospital bed.
You really thought your little complaints could ruin a decorated officer?
Malcolm stayed perfectly still.
Guys like you are just paychecks to us. I should have left you dead on that highway.
Voss shoved his heavy hand hard over Malcolm's mouth.
This time, I'm making sure you never wake up.
Malcolm pulled Voss's wrist away, his eyes locking onto the cop.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
Voss laughed, pressing his weight down harder.
Look around. Who's gonna stop me? You're on your own.
The room door suddenly swung open, and 3 armed men stepped inside. Voss froze. He had no idea the quiet man he was trying to suffocate was a federally protected witness, and the FBI agents now surrounding him had been waiting in the dark to end his career. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The hallway of Mercy Point Hospital stretched empty, under flickering fluorescent lights. Room 417 sat quiet at the far end, where the night shift nurse had dimmed the overhead bulbs to let patients rest. Inside, Malcolm Avery lay motionless beneath thin hospital blankets, his dark skin pale against white pillows, head wrapped in gauze that covered stitches along his temple and jaw. The monitors beside his bed beeped steadily. Heart rate, normal. Blood pressure stable. To anyone watching, Malcolm looked like a man deep in medicated sleep, recovering from what the police report called injuries sustained during lawful arrest. But Malcolm's breathing was too controlled. His fingers rested too carefully at his sides. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Officer Grant Voss appeared at the nurse's station, his uniform crisp, badge gleaming under the harsh lights. The hallway guard, a tired security officer named Martinez, glanced up from his coffee. "Checking on a suspect," Voss said, flashing his badge. His voice carried the easy authority of a man used to doors opening when he spoke. "Need to verify he's still here for tomorrow's interview." Martinez nodded without question. Cops checked on arrestees all the time. Nothing unusual about it. Voss walked past him toward room 417. The door handle turned slowly. Voss slipped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim blue glow from the heart monitor. The room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Perfect. Malcolm lay exactly where Voss expected him. Broken, bandaged, helpless. Voss closed the door behind him with a soft click. Then he pulled the privacy curtain around the bed, sealing them both inside a cocoon of shadows. "Well, look who survived," Voss whispered, leaning over the bed rail. His voice dripped with mock concern. The hero who was going to change everything. Malcolm's chest rose and fell steadily. His eyes remained closed. Voss smiled. The beating on Highway 9 was supposed to end this problem permanently. Malcolm should have died on that dark roadside instead of making it to the hospital, instead of making trouble for decent officers just doing their jobs. "You should have kept your mouth shut about things that ain't your business," Voss continued, his voice getting harder. "Should have driven your little bus route and minded your own life." The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Voss leaned closer, close enough to see the purple bruises spreading beneath Malcolm's bandages. His own knuckles still ached from the beating he'd delivered, worth every split second of pain. "I know you can hear me," Voss said, "and I want you to understand something real clear. The report's already written. Says you attacked me first. Says you resisted arrest and threatened an officer. Says you brought every bit of this on yourself." Malcolm's face showed nothing. "Ain't nobody gonna believe some bus driver over a decorated police officer," Voss continued. "Especially not some bus driver with a history of causing problems." "Yeah, I know about that protest arrest from 20 years back. Amazing what comes up in background checks. Voss straightened, adjusting his belt. The weight of his service weapon felt reassuring against his hip. See, men like you think you can make noise and somebody's gonna listen, he said. Think you can collect your little receipts and witness statements and play detective? But the real world don't work that way. The monitors kept beeping, steady, calm. The real world is about knowing your place, Voss said. And your place is keeping quiet about things that could hurt good officers' careers. He reached down and placed one gloved hand over Malcolm's mouth and nose. Malcolm's eyes stayed closed, but his body went rigid. Some men only learn when breathing becomes a privilege, Voss whispered. The heart monitor began to spike. A quiet voice behind Voss said, "Remove your hand, officer." Officer Grant Voss spun around, his hand jerking away from Malcolm's face like he'd touched fire. Special Agent Maribel Knox stood near the bathroom door, perfectly still. Her gray suit looked crisp even at this hour. Her badge hung from a chain around her neck, catching the dim light from the monitors. "I said remove your hand, Officer Voss," Knox repeated, her voice calm as winter steel. Voss straightened, trying to pull back the swagger he'd worn into the room. "What is this?" "I'm conducting official police business with a suspect." "No," Knox interrupted. "You're threatening a protected federal witness." The hallway door opened. Two more agents stepped inside, their weapons drawn but pointed down. One moved to the foot of Malcolm's bed. The other positioned himself between Voss and the door. Then the closet door swung open. A third agent emerged from the shadows, adjusting his earpiece. He'd been crammed in that tiny space for hours, waiting. Voss's face went pale beneath the fluorescent lights. His eyes darted between the agents like a trapped animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. "This is harassment," Voss said, but his voice cracked on the last word. "I have every right to question a suspect in my case." "Malcolm Avery is not a suspect," Agent Knox said, stepping closer. "He's a victim. And as of 6 hours ago, he became a protected federal witness under our custody." "Protected from what?" Voss demanded, though sweat was already beading on his forehead. Knox reached beneath Malcolm's hospital blanket and lifted a small black device no bigger than a quarter. A tiny red light blinked steadily. "Protected from officers who sneak into hospital rooms after midnight to threaten witnesses," she said. "Protected from officers who place their hands over federal witnesses' mouths and threaten to stop their breathing." The device in her palm looked innocent, harmless. It had recorded everything. "Every word you just spoke is now federal evidence, Officer Voss," Knox continued. "Every threat you made. Every admission you gave about falsifying reports." Malcolm's eyes opened slowly, like curtains being drawn back from windows. His gaze found Voss standing frozen beside the bed. "I heard every word," Malcolm said, his voice rough but clear. "Every single word you said about keeping quiet, about knowing my place." Voss stared down at him, his mouth opening and closing, like a fish yanked from water. "You were supposed to be unconscious," Voss whispered. "I was supposed to be dead," Malcolm replied. "That was your plan, wasn't it? Beat me on that roadside until I stopped breathing. When that didn't work, you figured you'd finish the job here." Agent Knox motioned to the agent by the door. "Officer Voss, place your hands behind your back." "Wait," Voss said, backing against the wall. "Wait just a minute. Who authorized federal involvement in a local traffic stop? This is outside your jurisdiction. Conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law is absolutely our jurisdiction," Knox said. "Witness intimidation is our jurisdiction. Attempted murder of a federal witness is definitely our jurisdiction. The agent stepped forward with handcuffs. "This is entrapment," Voss shouted. "You can't record private conversations without a warrant?" Knox pulled a folded document from her jacket. "Signed by Judge Morrison 3 hours ago, authorizing electronic surveillance of any attempt to intimidate or harm Malcolm Avery." The cuffs clicked around Voss's wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent began. "I know my rights," Voss snapped. Then his eyes narrowed as he looked back at Malcolm. "But you don't know what you just started, do you?" Footsteps pounded down the hallway outside. A woman's voice called out, desperate and frightened. "Dad! Dad! Where are you?" Lena burst through the doorway, her jacket half-buttoned, her hair wild. She must have received the warning text and driven here through red lights and empty streets. She saw her father awake in the bed. She saw the federal agents. She saw Officer Voss in handcuffs being pulled toward the door. "What's happening?" she demanded. As the agent dragged him past Malcolm's bed, Voss turned his head and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a defeated man. It was the smile of someone who still held cards nobody else could see. "You think I came alone?" Voss said to Malcolm before Agent Knox pulled him from the room. Minutes after Voss's arrest, Agent Knox stepped back into room 417 and locked the door behind her. The hallway outside had filled with curious hospital staff, but 2 federal agents now stood guard to keep everyone away. Lena sat in the bedside chair, her hands shaking as she gripped Malcolm's fingers. Her face was pale, her eyes red from tears she refused to let fall. "Dad, what is this?" she whispered. "Why were FBI agents hiding in your room? Why did that cop try to hurt you?" Malcolm squeezed her hand gently. His voice was still weak, but his words came clear and steady. "Baby, I need to tell you something I should have explained weeks ago." He looked at Agent Knox, who nodded. "I wasn't just driving seniors around town. I was helping the FBI." Lena's eyes widened. "Helping them with what?" "With a case," Malcolm said. "A big case about what's been happening to our people in this city." Agent Knox pulled a chair closer to the bed. "Your father came to us 3 months ago with evidence of a systematic pattern of abuse." Malcolm's jaw tightened as he remembered. "I kept seeing the same thing over and over. Elderly folks from our community getting stopped for nothing, getting their cars towed by the same company, getting hit with fines they couldn't pay, getting threatened when they tried to complain. Mrs. Johnson lost her car because they said her registration was expired," Malcolm continued. "It wasn't. Mr. Williams got pulled over 5 times in 2 weeks, always by the same officers, always near the bank on check day. They'd search his car, find nothing, but make him late for dialysis." Lena's anger flashed in her eyes. "Those cowards." "I started writing down names," Malcolm said. "Keeping receipts, recording conversations when people called me crying about what happened. I had dashboard footage from the van I drive. I had witness statements." Agent Knox leaned forward. "Your father brought us 47 documented cases of harassment, illegal searches, fraudulent towing, and financial extortion, all targeting elderly black residents, all involving the same group of officers." "Voss was one of them?" Lena asked. "Voss was the muscle," Agent Knox said. "But the operation runs deeper than one bad cop." Malcolm's expression darkened. "That's why he beat me that night. It wasn't random road rage. They found out I was talking to the FBI." "How?" Lena demanded. "We're still investigating that," Agent Knox said carefully. "But someone leaked information about our federal witness." The room fell quiet, except for the steady beeping of Malcolm's monitors. Then the door opened softly. A black woman in scrubs stepped inside, moving with the quiet authority of someone who had worked night shifts for decades. Her badge read Gloria Bell, RN. She was maybe 60, with silver-streaked hair and sharp, observant eyes. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the bed. "I'm Nurse Bell. I've been assigned to Mr. Avery's care tonight." Agent Knox tensed slightly. "Ma'am, this room is under federal protection. Which is why I need to show you something," Gloria said, holding up Malcolm's chart. "This medication order doesn't match what Dr. Martinez prescribed." She pointed to a line on the paper. "Someone added a sedative to his IV drip, a heavy one, enough to keep a man unconscious for 12 hours. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" Gloria's voice was calm but firm. "The authorization signature doesn't match Dr. Martinez's handwriting, and the timestamp shows it was added after visiting hours ended." Agent Knox stood up quickly. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying someone inside this hospital tried to drug your witness," Gloria said. "If that sedative had been administered, Mr. Avery would have been completely helpless when that officer arrived." The room went silent. Malcolm looked at his daughter, then at Agent Knox. The full scope of what had almost happened began to sink in. "They tried to get me twice," he said quietly. "Once through the chart. Once through Voss." Lena's voice shook with rage. "The hospital is working with them?" Agent Knox moved to the window and spoke quietly into her radio. Then she turned back to face Malcolm. "This is bigger than Voss," she said. "And they know you survived." The move happened in silence. Agent Knox led the way down the dim hospital corridor as two federal agents flanked Malcolm's bed. The wheels rolled quietly across polished linoleum. Dawn light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows that made every doorway look like a potential threat. Lena walked beside the bed, one hand resting protectively on her father's arm. Her eyes darted to every nurse, every orderly, every person in scrubs who passed them. After what Nurse Gloria had discovered about the medication chart, no one in the hospital felt safe anymore. "How much further?" Lena whispered. "2 more turns," Agent Knox said without looking back. Malcolm's head still throbbed from the beating, but his mind was sharp. He watched the faces of hospital staff as they passed. Some looked curious. Others looked away too quickly. One administrator near the elevator spoke urgently into her phone the moment she spotted the federal agents. "Dad, you okay?" Lena asked softly. "I'm thinking," Malcolm said. Nurse Gloria had insisted on coming with them. She walked behind the bed, her sharp eyes scanning every staff member they encountered. When a young orderly moved too close to the bed, Gloria stepped between him and Malcolm without saying a word. The orderly backed away. "Thank you," Malcolm said to her. "Don't thank me yet," Gloria replied. "We're not safe until you're behind that locked door." They reached the federal wing. Agent Knox used a key card to open heavy double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Inside, the hallway looked like the rest of the hospital, but Malcolm could feel the difference immediately. 2 more agents stood at a desk near the entrance. Security cameras covered every angle. The windows were reinforced. "Room 423, Knox said, guiding them to a corner room with a clear view of the hallway. As they transferred Malcolm to the new bed, Lena noticed something that made her stomach drop. Through the window, she could see news vans gathering in the hospital parking lot below. "Agent Knox," she said, pointing outside. Knox moved to the window and cursed under her breath. "What is it?" Malcolm asked. Knox pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "Turn on Channel 7, she told someone on the other end. Minutes later, a television was wheeled into Malcolm's room. Knox found the local news station and turned up the volume. On screen, Captain Russell Dane stood behind a podium outside police headquarters. He wore his dress uniform, every medal polished, every crease sharp. Behind him, the American flag hung perfectly still in the morning air. "I want to address the false allegations being made against one of our finest officers," Dane was saying to a cluster of reporters. Malcolm felt his chest tighten. Dane's voice was smooth, practiced, designed to sound reasonable. "Officer Grant Voss has served this community with distinction for over 15 years. He has commendations for bravery, community service, and protecting the most vulnerable members of our society." Lena's hands clenched into fists. "This is insane. The individual making these accusations has a documented history of resisting lawful police orders," Dane continued. "Last night's incident occurred when Officer Voss attempted to check on a suspect who had been injured during a legitimate traffic stop." "Suspect?" Lena exploded. "He's calling Dad a suspect?" Agent Knox held up her hand for quiet. "We stand behind our officers when they are targeted by federal overreach," Dane said, looking directly into the camera. "Officer Voss was performing his sworn duty when he was illegally ambushed by federal agents who had no jurisdiction in a local police matter." The camera panned to show reporters scribbling notes, accepting every word. "Furthermore," Dane continued, "we are investigating whether evidence was planted in an attempt to frame a decorated public servant. The FBI's conduct in this matter raises serious questions about their methods and their motives." Malcolm watched his reputation being destroyed in real time. On television, he wasn't a victim. He wasn't a witness to corruption. He was a dangerous criminal who had somehow tricked the federal government into protecting him. "This is a coordinated attack on law enforcement," Dane said, "and we will not allow it to succeed." The news anchor came back on screen. "That was Captain Russell Dane defending Officer Grant Voss, who was arrested last night on federal charges. We'll have more on this developing story throughout the day." Knox turned off the television. The room was silent except for the steady beep of Malcolm's monitors. Lena stared at the blank screen, shaking with rage. "We have to tell them the truth. We have to—" "No," Agent Knox said firmly. "One wrong move and we damage the federal case. Dane is trying to bait us into making mistakes." Malcolm stared at the television where Dane's face had been moments before. The man's words echoed in his head. "We stand behind our officer. Then we make them stand in court," Malcolm whispered. The federal wing felt like a fortress, but Malcolm knew fortresses could still be starved out. Agent Knox pulled a chair close to his bed. Her face was serious, all business. "Malcolm, I need you to understand what we're up against. Voss's arrest was the easy part." Lena looked up from her phone, where she'd been reading nasty comments about her father online. "Easy? Voss is a foot soldier," Knox explained. "Dane is the general. And generals don't go down because one of their men gets caught." Malcolm shifted in his bed, wincing. The pain in his ribs reminded him how real this all was. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need more than a recording of Voss threatening you. We need proof of the network, the command structure, the towing company, the hospital insiders." Knox's voice was calm, but Malcolm could hear the urgency underneath. "And we need it before Dane destroys your credibility completely." Through the window, Malcolm could see news vans gathering in the hospital parking lot. Reporters with cameras, waiting for something to happen. "They're going to keep coming after you," Knox continued. "Press conferences, leaked files, made-up stories about your past. Dane will try to make you look like a liar, a criminal, or worse." Lena stood up, pacing the small room. "So, what do we do? Hide forever?" "We build the case," Knox said. "But Malcolm has to testify, has to be the face of this thing. And that means surviving whatever Dane throws at him next." Malcolm stared at the ceiling tiles. Each one had tiny holes, like a pattern he couldn't quite figure out. "Why does it have to be me?" "Because you're the one who saw it all," Knox said simply. "You're the one who collected the evidence. You're the one they tried to silence." "Dad," Lena said, sitting back down, "why did you risk so much? Why didn't you just look the other way?" Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. The monitors beeped steadily. Outside, he could hear the distant sound of traffic, people going about their normal lives. "You remember Mrs. Washington from church?" he finally said. Lena nodded. "The lady with the blue hair. She's 83. Drives herself to dialysis 3 times a week." Malcolm's voice got stronger as he talked. "Last spring, Officer Martinez pulled her over for suspicious driving. Turns out she was driving too slow for his liking." Knox was taking notes, but Malcolm could tell she'd heard similar stories before. They towed her car, said she had unpaid tickets, made-up tickets. By the time she got it back, she'd missed 4 dialysis appointments. Nearly died. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Then there was Mr. Johnson. Lost his job at the grocery store because his car got impounded on fake charges. Couldn't get to work. Malcolm looked directly at his daughter. "And Mrs. Rodriguez. Stopped at a red light. Officer said she rolled through it. Towed her car. She missed her grandson's graduation because she had no way to get there. They were treating people like walking paychecks," Malcolm said, anger creeping into his voice. "Elderly folks who couldn't fight back, who wouldn't be believed, who'd just pay the fees and stay quiet." Knox leaned forward. "That's exactly the pattern we need to prove in court." The door opened quietly. Nurse Gloria stepped in, looking around carefully before closing it behind her. "I need to show you something," she said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "Before anyone else disappears." Knox stood up immediately. "What do you mean?" Gloria unfolded the paper. It was a copy of Malcolm's medication chart, the original one, before someone had added the mysterious sedative. "I make copies of everything that looks wrong," Gloria said. "Been doing it for years. Hospital administration doesn't like nurses who ask too many questions." Knox took the paper, studying it carefully. "This shows the alteration? Clear as day. Someone with administrative access changed that order after Malcolm was admitted. Added a sedative that would have made him groggy, confused, maybe unable to think straight if anyone came asking questions." Malcolm felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. "This gives us a thread into the hospital conspiracy," Knox said, excitement in her voice for the first time all morning. Across town, Captain Russell Dane sat in his unmarked car outside Mercy Point Hospital's administrative building. He checked his watch. 11:30. Evelyn Parkhurst walked out of the glass doors right on time. Tall, sharp-dressed, with steel gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She slid into the passenger seat without a word. "We have a problem," Dane said immediately. "I know. I saw the news." Parkhurst's voice was cold, professional. "Voss was supposed to be subtle. Voss was supposed to be final." Dane started the engine. "Now we have a federal witness who's very much alive and very much talking." They drove in silence for several blocks before Parkhurst spoke again. "What do you need from the hospital?" Dane pulled into an empty parking lot behind a closed restaurant. He turned to face her, and his polished public mask slipped for just a moment. "Make Avery look unstable before he speaks." That afternoon, Lena kissed Malcolm's forehead and squeezed his hand. "I need to get my textbooks and catch up on assignments. I can't fall behind because of this." Malcolm nodded, but worry creased his face. "You sure it's safe?" Agent Knox looked up from her phone. "We'll have someone watching from a distance." "But Lena, if anything feels wrong..." I'll call immediately. Lena grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'll be back before dinner. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Lena stepped into the parking garage, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. She found her small Honda and climbed in, checking the rearview mirror out of habit. A dark sedan sat 3 spaces behind her. Engine running. Lena started her car and pulled out slowly. The sedan followed. She told herself it was nothing. Lots of cars used this route. But when she turned left toward the nursing campus, the sedan turned left too. When she stopped at a red light, it stopped 2 cars back. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your dad should have kept his mouth shut. Lena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She screenshot the message and kept driving. The nursing school parking lot was nearly empty. Most afternoon classes had ended. Lena parked near the main entrance and watched the sedan drive past without stopping. Maybe she was being paranoid. Inside the building, she headed straight to her locker. The hallways smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Normal. Safe. Lena Avery. She turned to see Dr. Patricia Morse, the nursing program director. A woman who'd always been friendly, encouraging. Today her face looked tight, uncomfortable. Dr. Morse, hi. I need to speak with you privately. My office. Lena's stomach dropped, but she followed Dr. Morse down the hall. The office was small, cramped with medical textbooks and student files. Dr. Morse closed the door and gestured to a chair. Lena, I've received a very serious complaint about your behavior. What kind of complaint? Dr. Morse pulled out a printed email. An anonymous report claims you threatened hospital staff at Mercy Point. Specifically, that you became aggressive with nurses and made inflammatory statements about patient care. Lena stared at her. That's completely false. I've been nothing but grateful to everyone helping my father. The complaint also mentions your father's situation. The arrest, the allegations. My father is the victim here. He was beaten by a police officer. Dr. Morse shifted uncomfortably. Lena, I'm required to investigate any complaint involving student conduct at clinical sites. Until this is resolved, you're suspended from all hospital rotations. The words hit like a physical blow. Suspended? Based on an anonymous lie? I'm sorry. It's protocol. You can appeal, but this is because of what happened to my dad, isn't it? Lena's voice rose. Someone wants to hurt him by destroying my future. Dr. Morse looked genuinely pained. I hope that's not true, but my hands are tied. Outside the building, Lena's phone rang. Agent Knox. Lena, where are you? We saw social media posts using your father's name, calling him a career criminal. Lena looked around the parking lot. The sedan was back, parked near the street. They just suspended me from nursing school. Anonymous complaint. They're coming after Dad through me. Get back here immediately. Don't stop anywhere. The drive back felt endless. Every car looked suspicious. Every red light lasted forever. Lena's mind raced between fury and fear. They were attacking her education, her career, everything she'd worked for. Back in the federal wing, Malcolm took the news like a punch to the chest. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the pillows. This is my fault, he said quietly. I should have stayed quiet. Should have let them keep stealing from people. No. Agent Knox's voice was sharp. This is exactly what they want. They intimidate families because they know good people blame themselves when loved ones get hurt. Nurse Gloria appeared in the doorway. I heard shouting down the hall. Everything okay? Knox nodded toward Malcolm. They're attacking his daughter now. Gloria's face hardened. Those cowards. She pulled a chair closer to the door. I'm staying right here tonight. No unfamiliar staff gets past me. As dusk settled over the hospital, Lena returned to find Malcolm staring out the window. She sat beside him, took his hand. "They came after me because they know you're telling the truth." Early evening settled over Malcolm's guarded hospital room like a heavy blanket. The overhead lights had been dimmed to reduce the harsh glare, but Agent Knox's small recording device sat prominently on the bedside table, its red light blinking steadily. Lena pulled her chair closer to Malcolm's bed, her nursing textbooks forgotten on the floor beside her. "Take your time," Knox said, her voice gentle but professional. "Start wherever feels right." Malcolm shifted against his pillows, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his bandages. The pain medication made everything feel distant, but his memories remained sharp and clear. "I started driving seniors about 6 months after I retired from the city bus route," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Church folks, mostly. People who needed rides to doctor appointments, dialysis, physical therapy. Good people who worked their whole lives and deserved better than struggling to get around." Knox nodded, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "How did you first notice the pattern?" "Mrs. Washington, 82 years old, sweet as pie. I picked her up from dialysis one Tuesday, and she was crying. Said Officer Voss pulled her over 3 blocks from the medical center, claimed her registration was expired even though it wasn't. Towed her car to Harbor Line Recovery." Lena frowned. "That's the towing company that keeps showing up in Dad's notes?" "The same one," Malcolm confirmed. "Mrs. Washington had to pay $400 to get her car back. $400 for a woman living on Social Security." Agent Knox leaned forward. "What happened next?" 2 weeks later, Mr. Jerome Butler, 76, diabetic, drove himself to his foot specialist because I was sick that day. Same thing. Voss pulled him over, said his inspection sticker looked suspicious. Car got towed to Harbor Line. Another $400. Malcolm's voice grew stronger as he continued, the injustice of it fueling his energy despite his injuries. Then it was Mrs. Dolores Freeman. She called me crying because she couldn't afford the towing fee. Lost her part-time job at the grocery store because she couldn't get to work for 3 days. 3 days without her car. And she lost everything. Knox's pen moved quickly across the paper. "When did you start documenting?" "Right after Mrs. Freeman. I couldn't just keep driving people home from being robbed. Started keeping receipts they gave me, writing down badge numbers, dates, locations. Asked people to tell me exactly what the officers said." Lena squeezed her father's hand. "You never told me about this. Didn't want to worry you. Thought maybe it was just bad luck at first. But then I got the dash cam." "Tell me about the dash cam," Knox said. Malcolm closed his eyes briefly, remembering. "Installed it myself after Mr. Butler got stopped again. Same officer, same towing company, same $400 fee. This time I was in the car behind him, saw the whole thing. Voss didn't have cause to pull him over. Just did it because he could. You recorded it? Every second. Voss approached Mr. Butler's window already aggressive, already looking for reasons. Kept saying the car looked suspicious in a medical district parking lot. Like sick old people don't belong near hospitals." Knox flipped through several pages of notes, then reached for a manila folder on the windowsill. "Malcolm, I want to show you something that confirms what you suspected." She pulled out a detailed city map marked with red pins and yellow highlighter. Each red pin marked a location where elderly residents had been stopped and towed. The yellow highlighting showed a cluster of properties in the medical district. Every single false stop happened within 2 blocks of these highlighted properties, Knox explained. Properties owned by Russell Dane's brother through a shell corporation called Medical District Holdings. Malcolm stared at the map, pieces clicking together in his mind like a terrible puzzle. They were targeting people near those properties? It gets worse. Harborline Recovery pays rent to store towed vehicles on lots owned by the same shell company. Every car they impound generates revenue for the Dane family. The police stops, the towing fees, the storage costs. It's all connected. Lena's face went pale. They were using Dad's seniors like a business model? Exactly. Vulnerable elderly residents who couldn't fight back, didn't have lawyers, couldn't afford to challenge the system. Perfect victims for a profit machine disguised as law enforcement. Malcolm felt sick, and it wasn't from his injuries. How many people? Knox consulted another document. Based on Harborline's records from the past 2 years, at least 47 elderly residents, mostly black, mostly living on fixed incomes, total stolen through false towing fees, over $20,000. $20,000, Malcolm repeated, his voice hollow. Stolen from people who needed medicine, food, rent money. The scheme was brilliant in its cruelty. Knox continued. They targeted the most vulnerable population, used badge authority to make theft look legal, and counted on their victims being too scared or too poor to fight back. Malcolm's hands clenched the hospital blanket. Mrs. Washington missed 2 dialysis appointments because of this. Mr. Butler rationed his insulin because he couldn't afford it after paying towing fees. Mrs. Freeman lost her job and almost lost her apartment. That's why your evidence was so dangerous to them, Knox said. You weren't just documenting police misconduct. You were exposing organized theft disguised as law enforcement. Money was flowing from elderly victims straight into the Dane family's accounts. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of Malcolm's monitors. Lena stared at the map, tracing the cluster of red pins with her finger. They weren't just racist bullies, she said quietly. They were thieves. Knox closed the file and fixed Malcolm with a steady gaze. That is why Voss beat you. You found the cash trail. Later that same night, after Lena falls asleep in a chair beside Malcolm's bed, Nurse Gloria Bell made her rounds through the federal wing during her break. The hallway felt different with FBI agents stationed at key points. Their presence should have been comforting, but Gloria's instincts told her something was wrong. She had worked night shifts for 23 years. She knew when hospitals felt safe and when they didn't. Tonight, Mercy Point felt dangerous. Gloria checked on Malcolm first. He was sleeping fitfully, his monitors steady, but his face tense, even in unconsciousness. Lena had curled up in the visitor chair, her nursing textbooks scattered on the floor where they had fallen from her lap. The federal agent outside the door gave Gloria a respectful nod as she passed. Everything appeared secure. That was when Dale Mercer appeared at the end of the hallway. Gloria recognized him immediately. Mercer supervised hospital security on the day shift, but he had no business on the federal wing at 11:30 at night. He walked with the confident stride of a man who expected doors to open for him. He carried a clipboard and wore his supervisor badge prominently on his chest. "Evening, Nurse Bell," Mercer said, approaching Malcolm's door. "Need to check some equipment in 417. Gloria stepped directly into his path. "What kind of equipment?" "Heart monitor calibration, monthly maintenance." Mercer's tone was casual, but his eyes were hard. "Hospital policy. You know how it works." "I know how it works," Gloria replied evenly. "And I know heart monitors get calibrated during day shifts with proper scheduling. Let me see your written authorization." Mercer's jaw tightened. "I don't need authorization to do my job, nurse. Step aside." Gloria did not move. Instead, she glanced at his badge. Something was different about the access strip. The magnetic stripe looked newer than usual, shinier. "Your badge access," she said. When was it last updated? What kind of question is that? Mercer snapped. You're a nurse, not hospital security. Get out of my way before I write you up for interference. Write me up for what? Protecting a patient? Gloria's voice stayed calm, but steel crept into her tone. You want in that room, you show me proper authorization signed by the federal agents who secured it. Mercer stepped closer, using his height to intimidate her. Listen, lady, this is a police matter. Federal agents don't run this hospital. I do. That room gets checked tonight, whether you like it or not. Federal agents absolutely run that room, Gloria shot back. And if you try to enter without proper authorization, you'll be talking to them, not me. Mercer's face reddened. Nurses should not interfere with police matters. You want to keep your job? You'll step aside and let me do mine. My job is protecting patients. Your job is building security, not entering patient rooms at midnight with no authorization. Gloria pulled out her phone. Should I call the federal agents, or would you prefer to explain yourself to them directly? You're making a big mistake, Belle. The mistake would be letting you near that patient. That was when Special Agent Maribel Knox appeared behind Mercer, moving silently down the hallway like a shadow. Her hand rested casually near her service weapon. Problem here? Knox's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Mercer spun around, startled. Agent Knox, just routine equipment maintenance. This nurse seems confused about protocol. The only confusion is yours, Mr. Mercer. Step away from the door and place your hands where I can see them. What? Why? Knox's expression never changed. Because you have no authorization to enter that room, your badge access was upgraded 2 hours ago by someone with administrative override privileges, and you're attempting to intimidate a nurse who's protecting a federal witness. Mercer's confidence cracked. I'm hospital security. I have every right. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Knox gestured to another agent who appeared at the far end of the hallway. Search him. The search revealed no weapon, but Mercer's phone contained something more damaging. Knox scrolled through his recent messages and found what she was looking for. Text message from Evelyn Parkhurst, sent 43 minutes ago. Knox read aloud, Get the room cleared before morning. Mercer's face went white. That's not what it sounds like. Really? Then explain what get the room cleared means in the context of a federal witness protection detail. Equipment maintenance, I already told you. Knox held up the phone. Ms. Parkhurst is the hospital administrator who has no authority over federal security arrangements. Why is she giving you orders about a protected witness? Mercer said nothing. Within minutes, he was detained and removed from the federal wing. Knox immediately called Parkhurst, waking her at home. The administrator's response was predictably smooth. Complete misunderstanding, Agent Knox. Mr. Mercer misinterpreted a routine maintenance request. I'll have him disciplined appropriately. Knox disconnected the call and turned to Gloria. Parkhurst denies everything? Of course she does. Gloria watched the elevator doors close on Mercer and the escorting agents. But you caught him red-handed. Malcolm had awakened during the commotion. He sat up carefully, his bandaged head making him look fragile, but his eyes were alert and angry. Even here, he said quietly, even with federal protection, they still found a way in. Knox nodded grimly. Corrupt people always hold keys you don't expect them to have. Gloria looked at Lena, who was stirring in her chair, then at Malcolm, then at the door where Mercer had tried to enter. Your father needs more than guards, she told Lena. He needs witnesses who won't blink. The next morning began with Agent Knox moving evidence from hospital security into an FBI transport bag. Her movements were precise, methodical. Each item went into a labeled container. Each container was photographed and logged. Malcolm watched from his hospital bed as Knox worked. The federal wing felt different in daylight. Safer, but still tense. Lena sat beside him, her nursing textbooks forgotten in her lap. "Agent Knox," a voice called from the doorway. A young black man in hospital maintenance coveralls stood nervously at the entrance. His name tag read, Omar Willis, Security Tech. Knox looked up from her evidence bag. "Mr. Willis, you said you had something for us?" Omar stepped inside, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "I saved the hallway footage from 2 nights ago. The night Officer Voss came in here." Lena straightened in her chair. "Saved it from where?" "The security office deleted it the next morning, claimed it was routine maintenance. But I knew something was wrong when they deleted just that one night, and nothing else." Omar pulled a small external drive from his pocket. "I copied the files before they were erased. The footage shows Officer Voss entering the building with Dale Mercer. Mercer used his badge to bypass the front desk and escort Voss directly to this floor." Knox took the drive carefully, as if it were made of glass. "This shows conspiracy." "More than that," Omar said. "It shows Mercer knew exactly which room Voss was heading to. He led him straight here." Malcolm felt something shift inside his chest. Not pain this time. Hope. "There's something else," Lena said suddenly. She had been quiet all morning, but now she stood up with purpose. "Dad's phone. The one that went missing after the beating." Knox frowned. "We assumed it was destroyed or thrown away." "I found it." Lena's voice was steady but excited. "Hospital property storage. They bag personal items from trauma patients and store them in the basement. I checked yesterday after my classes." She handed Knox a sealed evidence bag containing Malcolm's cracked smartphone. "The screen is broken, but it still turns on. And Dad had automatic cloud backup enabled for audio recordings." Malcolm's eyes widened. "The dash cam audio." "From the traffic stop," Lena confirmed. "Everything Voss said to you is on there." Knox immediately connected the phone to a portable speaker. The audio was clear despite the damaged hardware. Voss's voice filled the hospital room. "License and registration. Get out of the vehicle. Now." Then Malcolm's calm response. "Officer, may I ask why you stopped me?" "Because I felt like it." "You got a problem with that?" The conversation continued, escalating quickly. Malcolm remained respectful throughout. Voss became increasingly aggressive without provocation. Then came the crucial moment. "You've been asking questions around the medical district," Voss said on the recording. "Questions about towing. Questions about stops. That ends tonight." "I don't understand what you mean, officer." "Dane wants you quiet. Permanently quiet. So we're going to have a little accident here." The sound of the first blow was sickening. Knox stopped the playback. The room was silent. For the first time since this nightmare began, everyone felt the case turning. Knox began making calls immediately, coordinating with federal prosecutors. "We have conspiracy. We have witness intimidation. We have assault under color of law. And now we have Captain Dane's name directly connected to the violence." Malcolm, still weak but determined, signed an affidavit confirming the phone, and root documents were authentic. His signature was shaky but legible. Lena allowed herself one relieved breath. "It's really happening, isn't it? They're going to pay." Malcolm looked at Omar, who was preparing to leave. "You risked your job for this. Your safety. Why?" Omar's expression hardened. "My father was stopped by Voss 3 years ago, coming home from dialysis. Voss made him get out of the car and humiliated him in front of a crowd. Called him names I won't repeat. Took his car registration and threw it in a puddle. My father never reported it because he thought no one would believe him. I'm sorry, Malcolm said quietly. Don't be sorry. Be glad we finally caught this bastard. As Omar carried the backup drive toward the elevator, the fire alarm suddenly erupted through the hospital corridor. The fire alarm shrieked through Mercy Point Hospital like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed in the corridors as Agent Knox grabbed Malcolm's wheelchair. "Move now!" she shouted over the noise. Gloria pushed Lena toward the nearest stairwell, while Knox and two other agents wheeled Malcolm away from his room. The sprinkler system erupted overhead, soaking everyone within seconds. Cold water streamed down Malcolm's bandaged head as they rushed through the chaos. "What about the phone?" Lena screamed, her voice barely audible over the alarm. "Evidence is secure," Knox yelled back, but her face showed worry. They reached the emergency stairwell just as smoke began pouring from the basement level. Hospital staff ran past them, some pushing patients in wheelchairs, others carrying medical equipment. The organized quiet of the Federal Wing had become pure panic. Knox's radio crackled with urgent voices. "Storage room is fully involved." Repeat. "Basement storage is fully involved." Malcolm's heart sank. "That's where they found my phone." "The backup drive," Lena said desperately. "Omar has the backup drive." Knox was already calling Omar's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Through the stairwell window, they could see fire trucks arriving in the parking lot. But Malcolm's attention was fixed on something else. A dark sedan speeding away from the hospital loading dock. "They planned this," he said quietly. Knox's phone rang. She answered immediately. "What do you mean arrested?" Everyone went silent except for the continuing alarm. "On what charges?" Knox listened, her expression growing darker. "That's impossible. He was with us 20 minutes ago." She hung up and looked at Malcolm. Omar Willis was arrested in the hospital parking lot. Possession with intent to distribute. They found cocaine in his work locker. "That's a lie," Gloria said fiercely. "Omar doesn't even drink coffee. He's been clean for years." "I know it's a lie," Knox replied grimly. "But he's in custody, and the backup drive was confiscated as evidence." The sprinklers finally stopped, leaving them all soaked and shivering in the stairwell. Knox's radio updated them on the fire, contained to the storage area, but significant damage to property records and personal effects. "How convenient," Malcolm muttered. By evening, they had moved Malcolm to a different hospital across town under heavy guard. The news was already spinning the story. Captain Dane stood behind a podium outside police headquarters, his uniform crisp and his expression confident. "Today's events show how desperate the federal government has become," Dane announced to the cameras. "A mysterious fire destroys evidence just as questions arise about its authenticity. A hospital employee with a drug problem suddenly becomes their star witness. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not justice. This is theater." Reporters shouted questions about Malcolm's condition and the federal case. "Mr. Avery is a man with a history of confrontation," Dane continued smoothly. "We have reports that his own supporters may be manufacturing evidence to support a false narrative. When the smoke clears, literally and figuratively, the truth will vindicate Officer Voss." Malcolm watched the press conference from his new hospital bed, feeling hollow. Everything they had built was crumbling. Then Lena burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. She held an official letter from Riverside Nursing College. "They suspended me," she said, her voice breaking. "Effective immediately. Pending investigation for alleged theft of controlled substances from Mercy Point Hospital." The letter detailed accusations that Lena had accessed the medication room without authorization and removed drugs during her father's stay. The charges were completely fabricated, But the college had acted immediately to protect their reputation. Malcolm stared at his daughter's devastated face and felt something break inside his chest. Not his ribs. Those were already broken. This was deeper. This was his spirit cracking under the weight of what his courage had cost the person he loved most. "Lena," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." She sat beside his bed, still crying. "It's not your fault, Dad." But Malcolm could barely hear her. All he could think about was the scholarship she had worked so hard to earn, the career she had dreamed of since she was 12 years old, the future he had just destroyed by refusing to stay quiet. That night, after Lena had gone home to figure out her legal options, Malcolm sat alone under federal guard. The television played softly in the corner, and he caught fragments of a late news update. Officer Voss may be released on bail pending trial, as questions mount about the federal case. Malcolm closed his eyes and felt the weight of defeat settling over him like a heavy blanket. Maybe they really do own this city. A few hours after Malcolm's lowest moment, the hospital room remained dim and quiet. The machines beeped steadily beside his bed. But Malcolm had not slept. He stared at the ceiling tiles, thinking about Lena's destroyed future, and wondering if staying silent would have been the braver choice. The door opened softly just before sunrise. Nurse Gloria Bell stepped inside, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked these halls for decades. She carried a small canvas bag and looked around the room carefully before approaching Malcolm's bed. "You awake, Mr. Avery?" she asked in a low voice. Malcolm turned his head. "Yeah, been awake all night." Gloria pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down. Her expression was serious but not defeated. "I heard about what happened to your daughter. I'm sorry. It's my fault," Malcolm said quietly. "I should have known they'd come after her." "No," Gloria said firmly. "It's their fault. And they made a mistake thinking I'd just watch it happen." She opened her canvas bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I need to tell you something, Mr. Avery. I never trusted this hospital's administration. Not for years. Too many charts getting changed. Too many people getting hurt. And nobody asking the right questions." Malcolm looked at the folder. "What's that?" "Insurance," Gloria said. "The night your chart got altered with that fake sedative order, I took pictures before anyone could erase it. I also copied the original doctor's notes and the fake authorization someone typed up later." She opened the folder and showed Malcolm several printed photographs, clear images of medication orders, timestamps, and digital signatures that did not match. "But there's more," Gloria continued. "That security supervisor, Dale Mercer, I photographed his access logs too. Shows exactly when his badge permissions got upgraded and who authorized it. Spoiler alert, it wasn't anyone from hospital security." Malcolm sat up slightly, feeling something stir in his chest that was not pain. "You kept all of this?" "Mr. Avery, I've been a nurse for 40 years. I've seen what happens when good people think they're powerless. So I learned to keep receipts." Gloria reached into her bag again and pulled out a small external hard drive. "That technician, Omar Willis, before they arrested him, he gave me a copy of that hallway footage. I took it home and saved it on my old computer. Figured if something happened to the hospital's version, we'd still have proof." "Gloria," Malcolm whispered, "they could come after you for this." "Let them try," she said with steel in her voice. "I'm 61 years old, Mr. Avery. I own my house, my car's paid off, and my pension's locked in. What exactly are they going to take from me?" She leaned closer. "But here's the best part. 3 days ago I was in the supply closet when I heard voices in Administrator Parkhurst's office. The door was cracked open, so I turned on my phone and recorded what I could hear." Gloria pulled out her phone and scrolled to an audio file. Want to hear Captain Dane's voice telling Parkhurst to make you look unreliable before you could testify? Malcolm's eyes widened. You recorded Dane? Sure did, clear as day. Him telling her to find ways to discredit your medical records, make you seem unstable, whatever it took to protect Voss. The door opened again, and Agent Knox stepped inside. She had been alerted by the guards about Gloria's early morning visit. Mrs. Bell, Knox said carefully, what's going on here? Gloria stood and handed Knox the external drive. What's going on is that I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by bad systems. Knox looked at the drive, then at the folder full of photographs. What exactly am I looking at? Proof that this hospital's administration conspired with Captain Dane to tamper with evidence and silence Mr. Avery, Gloria said matter-of-factly, including a recording of Dane himself giving orders. Knox immediately secured the drive and folder. Mrs. Bell, why didn't you come forward with this earlier? Because I needed to be sure, Gloria replied, and because I wanted to see how far they'd go. Now I know. They tried to destroy a young woman's future to protect themselves. That crossed my line. Malcolm looked at Gloria with something approaching awe. Why are you doing this for us? Because 30 years ago, my own son got stopped by a corrupt cop who planted evidence in his car, Gloria said quietly. Nobody believed him. Nobody helped him. He spent 2 years in prison for something he didn't do. She met Malcolm's eyes. People like Dane win by making victims feel alone and helpless. They want you to think you're fighting the whole world by yourself. The door opened once more, and Lena appeared. She looked exhausted, but determined. Dad, I heard voices. Is everything okay? Malcolm reached for her hand. Lena, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I doubted we could win this fight. She squeezed his fingers. Dad, I don't care about nursing school right now. I care about you. And I'm not letting you quit. Agent Knox listened to 30 seconds of the recorded conversation between Dane and Parkhurst. Dane's voice was unmistakable, telling the administrator to find medical reasons to question Malcolm's mental state. Knox looked up from the phone with fire in her eyes. Now we stop defending, she said grimly. Now we strike. The morning light cut through the hospital corridors as Agent Knox supervised Malcolm's final departure from Mercy Point. 2 federal marshals flanked his wheelchair while Lena walked beside him, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. Transport is ready downstairs, Knox announced, checking her watch. We have 40 minutes before the hearing begins. The elevator descended in silence. Malcolm's head bandages had been reduced to a smaller patch, but his movements remained careful and deliberate. The beating had taken its toll, yet something had changed in his posture over the past few hours. His back was straighter. His jaw was set, with quiet determination. The hospital's ambulance bay buzzed with controlled activity. A federal transport vehicle waited with its engine running, flanked by 2 unmarked cars. Knox had coordinated the move like a military operation. Mr. Avery, one of the marshals said as they approached the vehicle, we'll have you at the courthouse in 12 minutes. Medical staff will be standing by in case you need anything. Malcolm nodded. I'm ready. The transfer happened smoothly. Malcolm was lifted into the transport while Lena climbed in beside him. Knox took the passenger seat up front, radio chatter crackling as they pulled away from Mercy Point. Through the tinted windows, Malcolm watched the city pass by. These same streets had seen him beaten and nearly silenced. Now they were carrying him toward his chance to speak the truth publicly. The federal courthouse rose ahead of them, its stone facade imposing and solid. A small crowd had already gathered on the steps, news cameras, reporters, and a few curious onlookers who had heard about the hearing. Media's here, Knox observed. That's good. Transparency protects you now. The transport pulled into a secured underground garage. Federal marshals cleared the area before Malcolm's wheelchair was unloaded. The courthouse's medical holding room was sterile but comfortable, equipped with monitoring equipment and a direct view of the courtroom where he would testify. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Lena asked as they settled Malcolm into the room. "Stronger," he said simply. "Knowing Gloria had that evidence, knowing Omar tried to help us, it reminds me this isn't just about one man anymore." Knox returned from coordinating with courthouse security. "Malcolm, I need to explain how this hearing will work. You'll give limited testimony under oath. No cross-examination today. This is about getting your voice on the federal record before we execute the new warrants." Lena frowned. "But what if Captain Dane tries to turn this into another show? What if he twists everything again?" "He can't," Knox replied firmly. "Federal courtroom, federal marshals, federal cameras recording every word. This is the safest platform you'll ever have to tell the truth." Through the room's window, they could see people beginning to fill the courtroom benches. Malcolm recognized several faces immediately. Mrs. Dorothy Washington, the elderly woman whose car had been towed after a false traffic stop. She walked slowly but steadily to a seat in the third row. James Mitchell, the dialysis patient who had missed treatments because his vehicle was impounded on fabricated charges. He sat beside Mrs. Washington, his face grim but determined. One by one, the victims Malcolm had tried to help found their seats. Seniors from his church route, people he had driven to medical appointments, families who had trusted him with their stories of harassment and financial abuse. "They came," Malcolm whispered, watching the benches fill. "They actually came." "Of course they did," Lena said, tears in her eyes. "You stood up for them when nobody else would." The courtroom continued filling. News cameras focused on the growing crowd of elderly black residents who had traveled downtown to support Malcolm's testimony. Then the atmosphere changed. Captain Russell Dane entered through the main doors, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers in dark suits. He moved with practiced confidence, nodding to reporters and shaking hands with courthouse staff who recognized his authority. Dane's silver hair was perfectly styled. His uniform was pressed and decorated with commendations. He looked every inch the respected police captain he had always presented himself to be. Behind him came Officer Grant Voss, walking free on temporary release pending trial. Voss wore civilian clothes, but carried himself with the same arrogant swagger he had displayed in Malcolm's hospital room. The 2 men took seats at the front of the courtroom, surrounded by their legal team. Dane surveyed the room like he owned it. Voss scanned the elderly faces in the back rows with obvious contempt. "There's our target," Knox said quietly, watching Dane through the window. "Polished, connected, and absolutely convinced he's untouchable." A marshal approached their holding room. "Agent Knox, the judge is ready. We'll move Mr. Avery to the witness table now." Malcolm's wheelchair was unlocked, and they began the short journey into the courtroom proper. The room fell silent as he appeared. Cameras turned toward him. The elderly victims in the back rows sat up straighter. As they passed Voss's table, the officer leaned slightly forward and whispered just loud enough for Malcolm to hear, "Still breathing?" Malcolm's wheelchair stopped. He looked directly at Voss, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet courtroom. Louder than ever. Malcolm's wheelchair was positioned at the witness table, facing Judge Patricia Hernandez. The courtroom was packed. Cameras rolled silently from designated positions. The elderly victims sat in neat rows behind him, their presence a quiet wall of support. Judge Hernandez adjusted her glasses and looked down at Malcolm with professional concern. "Mr. Avery, are you comfortable proceeding with this testimony?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Please begin when you're ready." Malcolm took a breath and looked directly at the judge, then at the cameras. His voice was steady, clear, and calm. My name is Malcolm Avery. I'm 46 years old. I drive seniors to medical appointments through my church. On March 15th, I was stopped by Officer Grant Voss on Elm Street near the medical district. He did not rush. He did not dramatize. He simply told what happened. Officer Voss said I rolled through a stop sign. I did not. He ordered me out of my car and searched my vehicle without probable cause. When I asked for his badge number, he said, "Men like me don't get to ask questions." Malcolm named the intersection. He gave the exact time. He described Voss's patrol car number and the weather conditions. He called Harborline Recovery to tow my car. The fee was $800 for a vehicle worth maybe $3,000. When I said I needed my car for work, he told me I should have thought about that before running my mouth. Dane's lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Clemens, stood up. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Avery suffered significant head trauma. His recollections may be compromised. Judge Hernandez nodded. Mr. Avery, do you remember these events clearly despite your injuries? Yes, ma'am, very clearly. Malcolm continued, describing the pattern he had documented over months. Mrs. Dorothy Washington losing her car. James Mitchell missing dialysis. Grandmother Rose Jackson losing her job because she could not afford the towing fees. I collected receipts, Malcolm said. I wrote down license plate numbers. I saved dash cam footage. These stops happened every week, always near the medical district, always involving the same towing company. Attorney Clemens tried again. Your Honor, these are serious accusations against decorated officers. Mr. Avery's condition. Malcolm interrupted politely, but firmly. Ma'am, my condition is angry, not confused. A ripple of approval moved through the elderly section. Judge Hernandez maintained order with a gentle tap of her gavel. Continue, Mr. Avery. When I gave this information to the FBI, Officer Voss found out. On April 2nd, he stopped me again. Same street, same time of day. But this time, he did not just take my car. Malcolm described the beating in clinical detail. The first blow to his head. Being dragged from the vehicle. Voss kicking him while he was on the ground. He told me to stay quiet if I wanted to keep breathing. Then he left me bleeding on the sidewalk. The courtroom was completely silent, except for the soft whir of camera equipment. 2 days later, Officer Voss came to my hospital room after midnight. He put his hand over my mouth and told me some men only learn when breathing becomes a privilege. Voss's smirk had disappeared entirely. He sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Agent Knox stood up. Your Honor, we have audio evidence of that hospital encounter. She played the recording. Voss's voice filled the courtroom, cold and threatening. You should have died on that roadside instead of making trouble. Some men only learn when breathing becomes a privilege. The sound of Malcolm's monitor spiking came through clearly, followed by Knox's voice. Remove your hand, officer. Several elderly victims in the back rows shook their heads in disgust. Mrs. Washington dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Knox approached the judge's bench. Your Honor, we also recovered the audio from Mr. Avery's original traffic stop. Attorney Clemens shot to her feet. That evidence was destroyed in the hospital fire. A backup was automatically uploaded to a family cloud account, Knox said smoothly. Technology, counselor. She played the roadside recording. Voss's voice came through the speakers again, but this time from the street. Shut your mouth and get in the car, or this gets worse. Dane wants you quiet, so you're going to stay quiet. The courtroom erupted. Captain Dane's face went white. He whispered urgently to his lawyers, then stood abruptly and moved toward the main aisle. Federal marshals immediately stepped into position, blocking every exit door. Judge Hernandez slammed her gavel 3 times, but the courtroom chaos continued. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes strobed across the room. The elderly victims sat forward in their seats, watching decades of injustice finally crack open under federal light. Agent Knox stepped to the center of the room and raised her voice above the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, federal warrants have been issued based on evidence presented here today." The room fell silent instantly. Every eye fixed on Knox as she opened a leather folder. "Captain Russell Dane, you are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and operating a criminal enterprise under color of law." Dane tried to push past the marshals blocking his path. "This is federal overreach. I demand—" "You have the right to remain silent," Marshal Rodriguez interrupted, pulling out handcuffs. "I suggest you use it." The cameras captured everything as the cuffs clicked around Dane's wrists. His polished confidence crumbled completely. His expensive suit looked suddenly cheap under the harsh courtroom lights. Officer Voss jumped to his feet, pointing wildly at Malcolm. "He's lying! All of them are lying! This is a setup!" His union attorney, Patricia Clemens, quietly closed her briefcase and stepped away from the defense table. She did not look back. "Ms. Clemens," Voss shouted after her, "where are you going?" She paused at the courtroom gate. "Finding new clients, Officer Voss. Good luck." Agent Knox continued reading from her folder. "Grant Voss, you are charged federally with civil rights violations, assault under color of authority, witness intimidation, and attempted obstruction of justice." 2 marshals moved toward Voss's table. He backed against the wall, still shouting, "I served this city for 20 years! 20 years! And spent the last 5 stealing from elderly residents." Knox replied coldly. The courtroom doors opened behind the press section. More federal agents escorted a handcuffed Evelyn Parkhurst through the crowd. Her usually perfect gray hair was disheveled. Her hospital ID badge hung sideways on her wrinkled jacket. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several reporters recognized the Mercy Point administrator immediately. Knox addressed the room again. "Ms. Parkhurst was arrested 1 hour ago, attempting to destroy hospital records related to this case. She is charged with obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." Parkhurst kept her eyes down as agents guided her to a holding area near the judge's chambers. She did not try to speak. "Additionally," Knox announced, "Dale Mercer, Mercy Point security supervisor, is charged with conspiracy and aiding unauthorized access to restricted hospital areas." From the gallery, Nurse Gloria Bell nodded grimly. She had watched Mercer intimidate staff for years. Now everyone could see what kind of man hides behind a security badge. Agent Knox's voice carried clearly across the stunned courtroom. "Omar Willis, the hospital technician falsely arrested on drug charges, has been released. All charges against him have been dropped with prejudice." Several people applauded, including Mrs. Washington from the elderly section. Omar had risked everything to preserve the hallway footage. Justice demanded his name be cleared publicly. Furthermore, Knox continued, Harborline Recovery's business accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Federal agents are executing warrants at their facilities as we speak. Malcolm watched from his wheelchair as the network that nearly killed him fell apart, piece by piece. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He simply observed the truth doing what fear and intimidation could never accomplish, revealing itself completely. Lena sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but relief so deep it felt like drowning in reverse. The elderly victims filled the back rows with quiet dignity. They had waited years to see these men lose their power. Now they watched it happen in front of cameras that would carry the truth far beyond this courtroom. Mrs. Washington leaned over to the man beside her and whispered, "Malcolm made them remember we matter." Judge Hernandez restored order gradually. The marshals finished securing the prisoners. The reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks. Lena's phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced at the screen and gasped. Riverside Nursing College was calling. 3 months after the federal hearing, the headlines told the story the courtroom had started. Federal judge denies bail for ex-police captain in corruption case. Former Officer Voss pleads not guilty to civil rights violations. Mercy Point Hospital administrator fired after conspiracy charges. Harborline Recovery agrees to $2.3 million settlement in towing scheme. The newspapers lay scattered across Malcolm Avery's kitchen table on a bright Saturday morning. He folded them carefully and placed them in a box marked "Evidence, Keep Forever." His daughter Lena had started the box during his hospital stay. Now it overflowed with articles, court documents, and letters from victims. Malcolm stood slowly, gripping his wooden cane. The headaches had mostly stopped. The bruises had faded, but his left leg still ached when storms approached, and his memory sometimes stuttered during stressful moments. The doctors said both would improve with time. Time. That was something Malcolm had learned to measure differently now. He walked to the window and looked across the street at Mount Olive Baptist Church, where this whole fight had really begun. Not with the beating, not with the traffic stop, but months earlier, when elderly members started missing Sunday service because they were afraid to drive. "Daddy, you ready?" Lena called from the front door. She wore her nursing school uniform, crisp white scrubs with the Riverside College logo. The same school that had suspended her 3 months ago now treated her like a hero. The dean had personally apologized. The instructors who once avoided her now asked about her father's health. Lena accepted their changed behavior without bitterness, but she never forgot who had stood with her family when standing was dangerous. "Almost," Malcolm replied, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Today was not about courts or arrests. Today was about the money recovered from Harborline Recovery and the corrupt officers' seized assets. Federal prosecutors had worked with community leaders to create something unprecedented, the Avery Community Transit Fund. They drove through neighborhoods Malcolm knew by heart, past the corner where Mrs. Washington had been stopped 3 times in 2 months, past the medical building where Mr. Johnson's car was towed while he attended dialysis, past the intersection where Malcolm himself had been pulled over for suspicious behavior, the suspicious behavior of being black in a car nicer than Officer Voss thought he deserved. The restored East Side Community Center buzzed with activity. A small stage had been set up in the parking lot, surrounded by folding chairs filled with seniors, family members, church volunteers, and reporters. 3 white vans sat nearby, each painted with the fund's logo, a simple bus silhouette with the words "Dignity, Access, Justice." Malcolm stepped carefully from Lena's car, his cane steady against the asphalt. People turned and began applauding, but he raised his hand gently to quiet them. This day was not about him. Agent Maribel Knox stood near the back of the crowd, wearing civilian clothes for once. She had attended every major court hearing, always professional, always prepared. Today, she simply watched as the investigation she had protected became something that would outlast any prison sentence. Lena hurried to the first van, where she helped an elderly woman with a walker step up into the specially modified vehicle. The woman moved slowly, but smiled widely. Her name was Dorothy Mills, and her car had been impounded 6 months earlier on false charges. She had not been able to visit her doctor until today. "This is what victory looks like," Lena whispered to herself as she secured the woman's seatbelt. The crowd settled as Malcolm approached the microphone on the small stage. He did not use notes. The words came from months of pain transformed into purpose. "This fund exists because good people refuse to accept that suffering was normal," Malcolm began, his voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "Every dollar came from money stolen from our community. Every van represents a person who was targeted for being vulnerable. Every ride we provide says that dignity is not negotiable." He paused, looking at the faces in the audience. Some he recognized from his old bus routes. Others were new friends made through shared struggle. All had decided that silence was not safety. "I did not set out to become anyone's hero," Malcolm continued. "I just got tired of watching people disappear from their own neighborhoods because corrupt officers treated our streets like hunting grounds." Mrs. Washington stood slowly from her chair in the front row. "You made us visible again, Malcolm." "No, ma'am," he replied. "You were always visible. They just thought power meant the right to look away." The fund would provide rides to medical appointments, grocery stores, and legal aid offices. It would offer emergency assistance to people whose cars were impounded under suspicious circumstances. Most importantly, it would employ community members who understood that transportation was about more than getting from one place to another. It was about dignity, independence, and the right to move freely through the world. Malcolm accepted the position of fund director not as charity, but as continuation. The work had started long before Officer Voss pressed his hand over Malcolm's mouth. It would continue long after Captain Dane heard his verdict. As the ceremony ended and people began boarding the vans for the fund's inaugural rides, an elderly man approached Malcolm. His name was James Carter, and his granddaughter attended Lena's nursing program. "They thought they could make us disappear," Carter said quietly. Malcolm looked at the 3 vans filling with passengers, at Lena helping another senior climb aboard, at Agent Knox nodding approvingly from the back of the crowd. "No," Malcolm replied. "They taught us how loud the truth can get." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.